Hi there and welcome to this devotional video from Open Door Church Sunbury. Today we're going to see how the Apostle Paul uses one of these to encourage and motivate us into a better way of living and a better kind of relationship, to explain his teaching about those kind of things as a practical example. In Ephesians chapter 4, which is where we're studying at the moment, Paul starts out by encouraging Christians to live up to the life that we've been called to live up and not to live down. With that, there comes a negative admonition, a negative encouragement to no longer live as the Gentiles do, to not just follow the crowd and follow the way of the world. But it's not negative just to spoil our fun. It's not the intention of Paul or of God to make us unhappy, but the intention is to encourage us not to live self-indulgently in ways that make other people happy, and not to seek our own happiness in things that satisfy for a moment and then after that leave you feeling worse off. So although it sounds negative, and it sometimes can when we encounter things in the Bible that say, don't do this, don't do that, the intention is wholly positive to encourage us and train us into a better way of living. And so we're looking in Ephesians 4, starting at verse 25. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbour, for we are all members of one body. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. Anyone who's been stealing must steal no longer, but must work, doing something useful with their own hands, that they may have something to share with those in need. So here Paul is beginning to get down to some real practical, nitty-gritty advice and teaching. And he starts off by quoting from the Old Testament book of Zechariah. Each of you speak the truth to your neighbour. Don't lie, don't spread falsehood. No fake news, if you like. Maybe today he would say, be careful about what you share on Facebook. I try and make it a practice of not sharing any of these memes that go around on social media until I've personally checked them out and verified that they're true, because there's so many lies. Avoiding gossip and hearsay. Yeah, in the old days, you could pass something on and there'd be a little bit of Chinese whispers and probably the story would change a little bit in the telling. But today, more than ever, there are people out there who are deliberately spreading and disseminating falsehood and lies in the guise of truth. And it's so important that we as Christians don't get involved in that. We need to be people of the truth. In fact, Paul doesn't just say don't lie, don't speak untruth, but put off falsehood. And the Greek word there, and sometimes in the New Testament we can see nuances in the Greek that don't quite come out in the translation. The word is pseudos, and we still use that word, pseudo, to put in front of something, to say it's not the real thing, it's fake, it's false. Put off pretense, if you like. Be, as people, genuine, be honest and real and true. Because, he said, we're members of one body. When was the last time you maybe whacked a thumb with one of these, or perhaps in the kitchen accidentally took a little nick out of it with a sharp implement, and you said to your thumb, hey, are you okay? And your thumb said, I'm fine. No, it screamed at you and said, you hurt me, don't do that again. It's fine to be honest. I think sometimes as us nice middle-class English Christians, those of us who identify, we can just be too polite to the point of dishonesty sometimes. Jesus said when Nathanael was introduced to him, looked at him and said, look, here's a true Israelite in whom there is no guile, someone who is open and transparent and real. And what a good example for us to follow. And then Paul quotes from another book, the Psalms, Psalm 4 verse 4, be angry and do not sin. Now, again, in the Greek, that word for anger is orgizomai. I know what you're thinking, nothing to do with orgasm, orgizomai, which W.E. Vine, the authority, translates as being provoked or aroused to anger. The Amplified Version says exasperation, fury, or indignation. So this is an anger that's been provoked. This is not just a misreading. This is not, a being oversensitive and taking offense. This is anger that's been provoked. W.V. Harris points out that in antiquity, the word was often used of violent expressions of anger. This is not just being internally fuming. This is actually giving vent and voice and expression to anger. But Paul says, do it, but don't sin. In other words, be careful how you do it. It's not wrong to express anger, particularly if it's justified anger, but don't lose your temper. Don't just lash out, retaliate. Let it be for your healing, not for the injury of someone else. The body of Christ is not meant to self-harm. And when we wound one another, that's what's happening. The body of Christ, self-harming. We are not meant to wound each other. The body is not meant to wound its own limbs. And so don't lose your temper. Put your anger to bed before you go to bed, Paul said. Put your anger to bed before you go to bed. Don't leave it festering in your subconscious while you sleep, coming out in your dreams, putting down its roots deep into your mind while you rest. Let it go. And if you find that hard, if you're not able to do that, ask for help. You contact the pastoral team, get some prayer, maybe consider anger management if it's a real issue for you as a person, because it is so important. Jesus said, didn't he, that the thief, the devil, comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And there's few things that are more destructive than anger that's not dealt with, and anger that's misused. And then, the devil comes to steal. So Paul said, those of you who've been stealing, stop stealing. Going to the Greek again, the word is klepto, from which we get kleptomaniac. And it's not talking about like violent robbery and banditry and, major, bank robbery, major theft. It's talking about stealing in secret. It's talking about small scale. It's talking about petty theft, pilfering, filching, if you like. And so maybe that's something we can all identify with, because it's just little things. It's that thing that you brought home from the office and never got around to taking back again. Borrowing and not returning. I remember when I was a teenager, our youth group went and visited another youth group, and there was a guy there who had an album that I'd always wanted to listen to, and I begged him to lend it to me. And he said, you can borrow it, but you've got to promise to bring it back. Well, we never went back to that particular youth group. They never visited us. And I should have spoken to an adult. I should have spoken to a youth leader, my parents or someone, and said, I promised to take this back. I need to get this back to this guy. But I just left it. And years later, I found this album in my collection. I thought, I felt so bad because I promised. I'd stolen, effectively, that album. And by then, I couldn't even remember what youth group, what church, when, where. I had no means of returning it. And over the years, I've lent so many things, books, tools, things that have just never been returned. And I've kind of learned from that to be generous, to give. But I've had to learn that to give if I feel comfortable, if I feel able, but otherwise don't part with it. And that's a real shame. It shouldn't be like that. Small things like, putting in 0 bags at the self-checkout when you've actually used one. It's that kind of level of pilfering and filching and small scale. Paul says, don't do it. And one commentator suggests that because he then says the alternative is to work with your hands, he's not angling this at rich people. He's not looking at well-off professionals, such as they were in those days. He's talking about the working poor. He's talking about the people who are in need, but who found stealing as a way of meeting that need. And he says, no, that 2 wrongs don't make a right. That's not an authentic excuse and justification. We need to trust God for our needs. Sometimes we will be without. And we need to trust him in that as well, to accept that, to accept the lessons that life teaches us in that, and to honour God in doing what is right. And all of these things we can sum up in one little phrase, and it's one of two phrases that Jesus said sums up all of the law and the prophets. Love your neighbour as yourself. As we put it sometimes, do to others as you would have them do to you. So let's remember those little bits of advice, because they are about relationship. And a lot of the commandments, when you look at them, the do's and the don'ts, it's about the things that are necessary for the sake of relationship. And it's all about things, about the way actually we would like to be treated, and treating others in those ways. So may God help us to do to others as we'd have them do to us, to love our neighbours as ourselves, to restrain our anger, to think about honesty and openness and truthfulness and maintain that, and to not be tempted into little petty pilfering and filching that is so easy to do and so much, part of the world. Let's not get carried away, but let's be honest and honour God in all that we do. Amen.